Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Please note that all attendees are going to remain muted throughout the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions for the presenter or for PJR, we encourage you to use the designated question tab within the GoToWebinar control panel. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our speaker. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, and thanks for inviting me to the webinar. And yeah, hello and hello everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar where I'll explain you how to perform this business impact analysis according to ISO 22301, the business continuity standard. So my name is Dejan Kosutic, and I'm the CEO and also the lead expert for ISO 27001 and ISO 22301 at Advisora, so the company that focuses on cybersecurity and other compliance with ISO standards. So basically, yeah, let's move on with the next slide. So very briefly in this slide, you see the housekeeping. So if you have any questions, you can push them through this question pane. Yeah, so basically, feel free to send any questions that you have. So we'll have the Q&A session at the end, but feel free to send me your questions throughout the presentation, and I'll be glad to answer your questions even before the Q&A session. All right, okay, so basically, one of my main points today is really around this, that business big impact analysis is a crucial, I would say, step, crucial elements that you have to perform as of your business continuity management system if you want to be compliant with ISO 22301. And as you will see throughout my presentation, it will basically determine not only your business continuity planning, but also some other things that you will be doing as part of your business continuity. So the point here being is that without business impact analysis, you can't do really anything further. But this business impact analysis actually has, I would say, the biggest impact later on what how you actually configure this business continuity planning. So, and of course, I'll show you all of these things in the webinar today. Okay, so let's see the agenda. So first, I'll go through very shortly through terminology. There are a couple of things that you need to know about this standard. Then what is this BIA, business impact analysis, in this BCM, business continuity management process? What are the steps in the business impact analysis? So you'll see 5 steps there. Then how to determine this MTPD, RTO, RPO, so maximum tolerable period of disruption, RTO, recovery time objective, RPO, recovery point objective. So I'll show you in a couple of real-life examples, how you can actually determine these things through a business impact analysis. And if there is enough time, we'll also go through these biggest challenges with business impact analysis implementation. So I'll try to end the webinar, let's say, in about 40-45 minutes. So if there's still some time, then we'll go through these biggest challenges. And of course, at the end, we'll also go through a Q&A session. All right, so let's move on to this terminology part. So what is this MTPD, maximum tolerable period of disruption? So basically, this is basically a timing that you actually determine. So what is your, let's say, maximum maximum tolerable period of disruption? So how long can a particular activity in your company be inactive, so let's say disrupted, without you actually causing some catastrophic damage? And basically this is determined on the level of each activity, not on the level of the whole company. And this is something that this is one of the primary, I would say, outputs from a business impact analysis, where we actually determine when is the damage tolerable. And you'll also see this in one of my slides. You will see actually a scaling slide as the time goes. So let's say within, I don't know, 1 or 2 hours, the damage of disruption is acceptable. But when it reaches, let's say, 8 hours, I don't know, 24 hours, then it becomes unacceptable. And basically this point in time is then called MTPD, when the damage becomes unacceptable. Okay, so this is MTPD. Now, similar to this, recovery time objective is basically the timing until when you determine that you want to recover your particular activity in your company. Now, how is this different from MTPD? RTO is always equal or less than MTPD. Because of course, MTPD should this ends moment when you actually determine when you want to recover a particular activity, because this is when the damage becomes too big. But for some reasons, you can actually determine that RTO is shorter than this MTPD. And later on in these slides, I'll show you actually why you might actually go for a lower RTO, so that you actually go even before the damage becomes unbearable, so to say. And also there is this term called RPO, recovery point objective. It's also a maximum data loss. So basically this is very different from RTO, because RTO focuses on or describes how soon you want to recover your particular business activity. Whereas RPO focuses on how much of your data do you want to recover, or basically it's how far you want to recover your data back into the past. So RTO is about the timing of the recovery of your activity, whereas RPO is about the amount of data that you want to recover from the past. So let's say that your RPO is, let's say, 24 hours. This means that you want to recover all of the data that were created in the last, let's say, 24 hours, or let's say that your recovery point objective is, I don't know, 1 hour. In this case, you want to be able actually to recover the data, let's say, from the last 1 hour. And I'll show you this a little bit later on in a couple of examples, because this RPO then determines exactly the backup strategy. So basically, how often do you need to do the backup? So just to explain, RPO basically determines how much can you tolerate to lose the data. So it's maybe better to describe it in this way. So can you tolerate to lose the data from the last 1 hour, or let's say from the last 12 hours, or from the last 24 hours? And this is basically the recovery point objective. So what is the last point in time since when this recovery needs to be made? So let me show you in a couple of examples, and then it will be much clearer to you. Also, I'll show you, I'll send you now through this chat window. Let me just see how I can open it. I'll send you a link to an article which explains this RTO and RPO. So let me just try to send this now through this chat window. Just give me a second. Okay, so I think you can see now this link to this article, RTO and RPO. What is the difference between recovery time objective, recovery point objective? So you'll be able to open this link and then read the whole article through, so that you can actually read more about these terms. Okay, anyway, now let's go for this business impact analysis in the business continuity process. So I'll explain you the whole all of the major steps in this business continuity management process, and you will see where does business impact analysis fit into this whole process. So typically you start with the business continuity policy. This one is required by ISO 22301, and business continuity policy defines general things around business continuity. So basically, what does the company want to achieve with, in general, what does it want to achieve with business impact analysis? The support from the senior management, what are the main roles and responsibilities? So these kind of things. So it's a top level policy, and it defines, I would say, main things around business continuity management. Also, I'll send you now a link to an article which explains in more detail around business continuity policy. Okay. Okay, just give me a second and I'll send you this link. Okay, in any case, I'll send it in later on. I just need to fix something with my computer. Okay, now the next step is around the business impact analysis and risk assessment. So business impact analysis and risk assessment, these two things together form actually a form of analysis. So this is where you analyze your existing system, your existing processes in your company, your existing, I would say, assets, and then you determine some crucial things for the next step, and this is strategy. So business impact analysis, as you will see later on in my in the next couple of slides, this is where you define basically your RTOs and RPOs. This is the most important output. I'll explain this a little bit later on. Whereas for risk assessment, you actually analyze and determine what are the biggest risks, what are the biggest potential incidents that could happen that could actually disrupt your business activities. And then you move on to the next step, and this is the strategy. And basically the strategy is defining how will you obtain all the resources and how will you prepare all of the resources if really a disruption happens. This is because, for example, let's say that you have, I don't know, for example, an earthquake, right? So if you have such a big disaster, you won't have time to prepare everything that you need to recover once an earthquake happens, right? So what you need to do is prepare all the resources up front so that you can actually have everything that you need in order to be able to recover. And this is the idea really here of this business continuity strategy, is to really define what exactly do you need. So for example, in case of an earthquake, you will need probably some kind of an alternative location for your offices. You will probably need some kind of an alternative location for your data processing center or whatever you have, where if you don't have everything in the cloud, right? If you have physical hardware for your servers and so on, I don't know, your communication facilities and so on. So all of these things will need to be prepared upfront if you want to successfully recover within your RTO if such an incident happens. So this is really about strategy, where you're preparing these things. And then the next step is to define these business continuity plans, in which you actually define exactly the steps, how you're going to recover if a particular incident happens. Let me see now if I can send you this link to an article. Okay, so let me see if this works. Yeah, unfortunately, I still can't really send you these links. Let me see if I can do it again. Yeah, it doesn't work for me now. Here we go. Okay, now I send you this link to an article about business continuity planning, where you can read more details about it, and I'll also send you now the link to the article about business continuity policy. Good. I see some questions coming in. Let me open it. So question from Michael: is the BIA in the BCN context different from the BIA in the normal risk management process according to ISO 27001? So ISO 27001 does not mention business impact analysis at all. So there is no, such concept in 27001. Therefore, it's not mandatory. It's not something that you would normally do as part of ISO 27001 unless you want to do it as an extra activity. So if you do it as part of ISO 27001, then you can apply the same logic as for 22301. But again, this is not something that you would normally do as part of this 27001 implementation. Tanya is asking, where do I find the chat in the app or in the web browser to access these links that you're sharing? So you should have this control panel. So I'm not sure if you're joining the webinar through this through your computer. If you joined through the computer, you should have this control panel, and then in the control panel you can ask questions, but you can also see all the links that I'm sharing. Okay, very well. Now, after you create all of your plans, then you have to go for this next phase, which is around exercising and testing. And basically, exercising and testing is really about testing how all of these arrangements around business continuity would work in a real life. Because these incidents, disruptive incidents, so bigger incidents around business continuity don't happen very often, and hopefully will never happen for your company. But nevertheless, you need to try out if you are really ready. So if you really prepared all the necessary resources according to your strategy. If you can really, recover your, servers or your business activities according to your business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans. So these things you can never plan, I would say, good enough, because there will always be something that you've probably forgotten. And this is why this exercising and testing exists. And this is how you actually find all of these things that you have forgotten by actually doing these exercising and testing. And then you actually, based on those, improve your business continuity plans and your strategy. And I'll also send you now this link to this article, which explains in more detail how you perform business continuity exercising and testing. Now, so basically this is, as you can see, where this business impact analysis fits into your whole business impact in your business continuity management process. So it's at the very beginning, right after your business continuity policy, and this part is basically where you analyze your existing system, your existing processes, your existing company, so that you can build all of these things later on. Now, what are the steps in the business impact analysis? So you basically start with this defining the business impact analysis methodology. So you start by, defining in this methodology, you have to define which kind of questions you're going to ask in order to be able to collect all the information, who will going to do it, through which, means, these kind of things. So all of these things will need to be determined through this business impact analysis methodology, right? So first you define the rules, and then later on you actually do it in the real world. I'll also send you now a link to an article which speaks how basically to perform this business impact analysis. The next step is actually to collect the data. Typically, the data for the business impact analysis is collected through questionnaires. So you create a questionnaire for each of your activities. Now, just to explain also, these activities are typically the easiest way to organize business impact analysis is that one activity is actually one department. So let's say that you are, a small software as a service company. Let's say that you have, 30 employees, and that you have a couple of departments, that you have, let's say, software development department, that you have the DevOps department, where you basically, take care of the hosting and these kind of things, that you have, let's say, sales department, that you guys have customer support department, and you also have, let's say, the management and something like this. So you would have typically 5, in such a small company, you would have, let's say, 5 departments. So you would actually create 5 separate questionnaires and then collect this information from these 5 departments in your company. And then the next step is to calculate this maximum tolerable period of disruption, RTO, RPO. So these things are calculated after you complete the data through this business impact analysis. And in a couple of slides, I'll show you a couple of examples exactly how you can actually, which questions you can use to assess the level, and also then how you determine the level of all of these 3 things. And then after you do this, you can write a report, business impact analysis report. It's not directly required by ISO 22301. So the business impact analysis report is not required by the business impact by 22301. But you can write this as a separate report. I see this very often in, let's say, mid-size or larger companies. For smaller companies, this is not something that you would normally do. And also, what you must do is actually incorporate the results of this business impact analysis into business continuity strategy. So this one is mandatory. Business continuity strategy is mandatory, and typically this is where you document the results if you didn't document them already in the separate report. Good. Okay. Before moving on into details how you actually calculate these MTPDs and RTOs and RPOs, I'll send you also an article which describes which documents you need to have to be compliant with ISO 22301. So it's called List of Mandatory Documents. I mean, the article is called List of Mandatory Documents. Good. Now let's go to the most interesting part, and this is basically how would you normally which kind of questions you would normally ask to determine all of these things. So we'll start with the MTPD and then with the RTO, and in the next slide I'll show you some examples for RPO. Right. So this is for determining this the level of damage for your business activities. And as you can see, there is this questionnaire. These are the examples of the questions that you can ask in the questionnaire. And there are two types of questions here. As you can see there, on the top level, there are these qualitative questions, right? And bottom, you have these quantitative questions. Now, the qualitative questions here are, for example, how will your clients react to a disruption? What will be the impact to other activities in the company? How will the disruption influence the loss of reputation of your company? How difficult will it be to catch up on the backlog of work, right? So these are all qualitative questions. Whereas there might be some quantitative questions like how much will the legal and contractual penalties cost? How much will repair expenses be? How much will the revenue? How much revenue will we lose? Right. So all of these things are quantitative questions in this, and of course you can describe them. I mean, determine them in some currency. Now, none of these questions are required by ISO 22301. It's all up to you to decide, what kind of questions you want to ask and what is really relevant for your company. You might have, I don't know, one question for your whole business impact analysis, or you might have, I don't know, 50 questions. You might have different questions for qualitative and quantitative, or you might have merged everything together. So it's really up to you to decide on these things. Anyway, besides these questions, you also have these scales. As you can see, they're the scales in terms of time. So basically, you need to assess what is the level of damage after 2 hours, what is the level of damage after 4 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, 1 week. Again, this is not defined by the standard. This is something that you determine on your own. But let's say that this would be, let's say, an appropriate scale. And then the third thing is that you have to actually assess the scale, the impact in terms of for qualitative, the impact in terms of a scale of 1 to 4. So 1 is that this is a marginal impact, 2 acceptable impact, 3 high impact, and 4 catastrophic impact. Okay. So let's go for this first question. So in this hypothetical case, let's say that you have departments and that your clients will react after 2 hours of disruption. They will react acceptably. So level 2 acceptably. After 4 hours acceptably. However, after 8 hours, they're not, let's say, reacting acceptably. In this case, you already have a high impact in terms of how your clients are reacting. After 24 hours, the same. However, after 48 hours, there is a catastrophic impact. Basically, so you assess that after 48 hours, the reaction of your clients will be catastrophic, right? That they will start simply leaving your company, that they will start using some competitor. Okay, let's see the second question. What will be the impact to other activities? So after 2 hours negligent, after 4 hours, this could be acceptable impact, right? 8 hours the same. After 24 hours, there is already a big impact on other activities in your company if this particular activity is disrupted. So again, you always have to analyze the impact for this particular activity. Let's say that this is Okay, let's say this is a software development department. Just for example, just hypothetically say that this now is an analysis of a software development department in a particular company. How will disruption influence the loss of reputation? So again, after 2 hours negligent, after 4 hours, 8 hours acceptable, after 24 hours high impact, so already a big problem, and after 48 hours it's already catastrophic. Okay, and how difficult will it be to catch up on the backlog of work? As you can see, already some scale. So of course, these assessments will be subjective assessments on what exactly your people in your company think, not in your company, in this particular department, what they think, how the impact will be, how big will be the impact. Now, quantitative questions, how much will be the legal and contractual penalties, the cost? So after 2 hours, nothing. However, already after 4 hours, there would be $1,000 of some kind of penalty. After 8 hours, a penalty would be $2,000. After 24 hours, it rises very steeply to $30,000. After 48 hours, $60,000, and so on. So again, it's about up to the particular department to actually calculate how much will be all of these penalties. In this case, after a certain amount of time, this activity is disrupted. How much will the repair expenses be? Again, after 2 hours, nothing, 4 hours, nothing, but then after 8 hours, it's $5,000. Then after 24 hours of a disruption, $20,000, and so on. How much will the revenue will lose? Okay, nothing happens until 24 hours, and then you have this $10,000 of the $10,000 of damage after 24 hours. So this, again, is one example on how this could look like in the real life. Now, the question is, once you get all this data, how you then determine the MTPD? And basically, you actually have to look visually. So let me just show you this. And then you try to draw a line between what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in this particular for this particular activity, or for this particular department. So let's say that typically, if you have this impact of 1 or 2, that this is usually acceptable, whereas everything that is 3 and 4 is not acceptable. And as you can see, I have drawn this line here for these qualitative questions, that most of these 3 and 4s are actually left on the right-hand side, whereas on the left-hand side are mostly 1s and 2s, right? So I would say that somewhere between 8 and 24 hours is the MTPD. So it might be, let's say, around 16 hours. It might be around, let's say, 20 hours, maybe 22 hours. But probably already at 24 hours is probably too big. So you actually have to go towards 8 hours. Now, where exactly between 8 and 24, this is something that then needs to be, I would say, agreed within the department itself, and of course, between the department and the senior management. But this kind of analysis gives you, I would say, a pretty good idea of, visually, a pretty good idea where this MTPD needs to be placed. Okay, similar activity you have to do with quantitative question. Again, as you can see here, $1 or $2 or $5,000 are probably acceptable losses, but when it comes to $30, $40, $20,000, then probably not. So in this case, also somewhere between 8 and 24 hours is this line where you actually have to set this MTPD. So let's say that here you actually have the results of the qualitative analysis and quantitative are aligned, and all of them show that the MTPD is somewhere between 8 and 24 hours. Okay, so this is how we come up with MTPD. Now, how do you actually come to the RTO? Again, RTO can be, let's say that you after this analysis that you've set the MTPD, let's say to 20 hours. This is something that you agreed that 20 hours is the MTPD for this particular department. Let's say this is a software development department. Now, how do you then determine the RTO? So the RTO can be a maximum of 20 hours. It cannot be more than 20 hours, but it could be less than 20 hours. And why would it actually be less? In which cases could it be less? It could be less if there is another activity in your company which depends on this particular department, but there in this other activity, the MTP there is lower. So let's say that you have, I don't know, some other department, let's say XYZ, where in your company where the MTPD is not 20 hours or 24 or 16. Let's say that there you set the MTPD to, let's say, 10 hours in this other department. And this other department depends on this particular department for its recovery. So if you recover this particular department within 20 hours, you will actually be too late to help the recovery of this other department where the recovery time is lower, right? So because of this other department, you will have to decrease the amount of time for the recovery for this particular department, also to, let's say, 10 hours. So in this case, RTO would be here 10 hours because this department will have the help the recovery of the other department where the MTPD is shorter, where it is 10 hours. Okay. So this is how it plays out. First, you determine the MTPD for this particular department. Then you see if there is any connection to some other department where some other department would be dependent on this one. If there is no, then the RTO basically is equal to MTPD. If there is a connection, if some other department does depend on this initial department, then you will have to decrease the RTO to match their shorter MTPD. So a little bit of a lengthy explanation, but I hope I made it clear. Okay, now let's move on to the next slides around the RPO, sorry, the recovery point objective. Yeah, so basically here, again, you have kind of similar form, and here you basically see that you need to list all of your, let's say, databases or software or paper-based information, anything that you have that you use normally in your business. So you could have, I don't know, starting from, I mean, any data that you're producing. So starting from customer relationship management software to, I don't know, emails, to documents that you're creating, to, I don't know, some core software that you're using for your business purposes, to, I don't know, maybe even documents that you create in paper form and so on. And for each of those, you actually have to assess how big the impact would be if you lose a certain amount of data. Okay, and then you would say, okay, for software number one, if you lose the data for the last 2 hours, so all the data that were created in the last 2 hours, what would be the impact? Also 4 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, and so on. So basically, you try to assess the damage of lost data. This is how you calculate the RPO, and I'll explain later on why this is important. So let's say that for software number one, it's fine if you lose the last 2 hours or 4 hours or 8 hours, it's still fine. But if you lose more than 24 hours, then it becomes really a big problem, especially if you come into 1 week, then it's catastrophic. Now, why it might be not such a big problem? Because this data might not be important at all. This might be something that you can, simply recreate from the internet. Maybe this is some, let's say that you're doing some, I don't know, press clipping, from the news on the internet. It doesn't matter. You go back to the internet and collect this information again. Okay, let's see software number two. Now here you have a slightly different situation. After 2 hours, if you lose the last 2 hours of the data you created, this would be, let's say, acceptable. 4 hours acceptable, but again, at 8 hours it becomes high, and then becomes a catastrophic after 24 hours. And then you have some database where you have already catastrophic damage after 2 hours. So for example, let's say, banking applications, transactions, transactional software where you actually, the payments applications in banks, if you lose not 2 hours, if you lose a single transaction there, it's already catastrophic, but because it's extremely hard to recreate this data again, because all of the payments are of course made electronically. So in these kind of highly critical applications, you cannot afford to lose not a single piece of data, let alone 2 hours or 24 hours. And let's say that you have some paper-based documents, which basically it's a low impact all the way to 1 week. So if you lose, I don't know, more than 1 week of data, then this could be a little bit bigger problem. So as you can see, what will typically happen in your company is that for different software, for different applications, for different databases, you will have different impacts in terms of how much can you afford, how much data you can afford to lose. And then you make, again, a similar analysis as I did in the last slide, and it looks something like this. So here for this software number 1, the analysis shows that, I mean, you can afford to lose the data from the last 8 hours, but not from the 24 hours. So here probably the RPO will be, again, between 16 and between 8 and 24 hours. So let's say this is 16 hours. For software number 2, the RPO will probably be between 4 and 8 hours. So let's say this is, I don't know, 6 hours. For database XYZ, the RPO is practically 0, right? So in this case, RPO, you defined it's at the very beginning. And for this paper-based document, it's between, let's say, 48 hours and 1 week. Let's say that you set it at 5 days. So why is this important in practice, this definition of the RPO? It's important because this is how you define your backup policy. This is how you define how often you need to do the backup. So let's go back to this software number 1. If your RPO is, I think I said 16 hours. So if you can afford to lose a maximum of 16 hours, this means that you have to perform the backup at least every 16 hours, if not even more often. Because if you do the backup, let's say every 24 hours, this means that you will actually sustain unacceptable damage if you lose more than 16 hours. Let's say if you lose, I don't know, 22 hours, or you're doing the backup every 24 hours. So you can actually theoretically lose all the data between from the last until you made the last backup. Here, if the for the software number 2, if the RTO is 6 hours, this means that you have to perform the backup every 6 hours. Here, for this database XYZ, if you can't afford to lose any data, this means that you have to perform the backup in real time, right? So whenever and whatever, let's say, data is created, in real time, you have to create its copy in a backup system. And again, for, let's say, these highly critical applications in banking, this is exactly what is being done. In real life, in real time, you actually, these systems create the backup, and this works pretty well. And yeah, for paper-based documentation, let's say that this is what, 5 days. So I don't know, you will have to digitize these companies, at least these paper documents, at least 5 days as a method of doing the backup. Okay, so in general, this is how these MTPDs and RTOs and RPOs are determined, and then what exactly you are doing as with this information that you receive. All right, yeah, so basically this is, I would say, the majority of your business impact analysis. So again, once you have this information, then you have to use this information to create business continuity strategy. So for example, if you have this database XYZ that needs to create a backup in real time, this means that you need to create a solution which would be able actually to create a backup in real time. So of course, it's a very expensive solution, but it's doable. So it's a part of the strategy how you do it. On the other hand, if you go for this last row, if you have to create if you have to digitize, so basically scan the documents, paper documents, I don't know, every 5 days, well, okay, then you need some more or less sophisticated solution which will be doing exactly that. And you need to prepare and start doing this. Speaking back about RTOs, from the last slide, how this reflects in the strategy. So for example, if you set your RTO to, let's say, 8 hours, so that you need to recover your particular activity within the 8 hours, Then you need to prepare, secondary location. This might be some kind of an office, or you might simply say to your employees that they will continue working from home. But you also need to figure out, how you will recover in that time all of your IT systems and so on and so forth. So you have to prepare, not only the hardware, but also software, the data, and so on. So all of these things are then defined in the strategy. Good. Now, yeah, some of the typical bigger challenges that are happening with the business impact analysis. Very often the top management, the problem that happens is that top management with the support of the senior management, and how to overcome this problem. So one way to do it is from the compliance side. For example, especially if your company is based in Europe, especially if your company is regulated through, let's say, DORA regulation, which is a regulation for cybersecurity regulation for financial sector. So if you're, I don't know, a bank or the insurance company or something like this, then you're regulated by DORA. DORA specifically requires business impact analysis. Similar thing for NIS2. If your company needs to comply with NIS2 as a critical infrastructure company, so you also have to perform not directly the business impact analysis, but basically you have to prepare everything needed for business continuity planning. And this is one of the things that is important. On the other hand, if your company simply wants to go for ISO 22301, if you want to get the ISO 22301 certificate, this is one of the main steps, as you can see, without which you can't really do a business continuity planning well. So the point that you have to present to your senior management is that really there is no way forward with business continuity if this analysis is not done properly. Okay, the next challenge is really a common understanding and language between business and IT. This is not a problem that happens only because of business continuity, right? It's sometimes in companies this problem happens, just because the IT guys don't understand the business guys, and business guys do not understand the IT guys. However, when you start doing this business impact analysis, actually what starts to happen is that these two sides suddenly have a better understanding of each other. Why? Because on one hand, when the business side starts to do this business impact analysis, as part of it, you can also list all of your assets, and then you can start understanding what kind of IT assets you're using, and what is really their criticality, what is their, I would say, why they're so important for the business. On the IT side, what these people in the IT will start seeing is that the business people will start telling them what is more and what is less important from the business point of view. And I would say that, again, business impact analysis is not going to resolve all of your, let's say, misunderstanding in the company, but it will help up to a point for these two sides to understand each other a little bit better. So I think that this could, the business impact analysis process itself could be a kind of a solution to this. Another challenge is usually getting all the dependencies, including on IT services, and this is, very well achieved if you do this business impact analysis properly. So if you start listing, as I mentioned, these IT assets, then you get a much clearer idea on what is dependent on what. Because if you don't do this kind of analysis, it's extremely hard really to understand what exactly does one department use in terms of IT. Of course, it's easy to list, I don't know, all the laptops, but it's much harder to understand what all these applications that you're using depends, and who is actually in charge of them, who is behind them. Okay, one of the challenges is also around subjectivity. So how do you actually assess, these time frames when especially for the qualitative part, where you actually have to assess when something becomes, when a disruption becomes really unacceptable. And yes, it's not an exact science, and it is something that needs to be discussed. And the best way really to do it is that the person who is doing this impact analysis, typically this is the head of the department, discusses these points with a business continuity manager or whoever is managing this business impact analysis process, but also with other people from the department. And then, once you start discussing these impacts, it actually gets clearer and clearer on what needs to be written there. Because if the company never actually discuss this, then of course no one will have a clear understanding on what the real impact is. But through this discussion, by forcing yourself actually to think this through, you actually could come to a much clearer opinion on this. It will never be, fully correct. It will never be fully, I would say, right, because there are no right and wrong answers, right? But the fact that you actually have to start thinking about it will produce, I would say, a pretty good result. And then ultimately, there is this interviewing the organization and the administrative follow-up. So if you set up this properly, so if you have this project approach, so that you have let's say business continuity manager who is organizing the whole business impact analysis process, who then prepares all of these questionnaires, who does all of these interviews with, schedules all of these interviews with the heads of the departments, help them actually fill this out, follows up on any let's say remaining things that need to be. So if this is organized well, then I would say this from the process point of view, it usually goes rather smoothly. Okay, so just to kind of conclude here, you should not again underestimate this business impact analysis, because really without these conclusions, without this analysis, the whole business continuity would be based on wrong foundations. So something that really needs to be done properly before you actually start your planning. All right, so basically this was it from what I wanted to present you today. And yes, so if you have any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer your questions. So let's see if anything is coming through. Let's see if there are any other questions coming in. So I believe I did answer a couple of questions that came through during my presentation. Let me just see if there is anything else. Okay, in any case, feel free to get in touch with your PGR representative. Of course, PGR is here an accredited certification body for ISO 22301. ISO 22301 will become especially interesting in the UK because of some regulatory changes there. And it's certainly recommended as the leading business continuity standard. And yeah, if you see that this is something that this kind of a certification is, I would say, beneficial for you, please do get in touch with PGR, and they will explain you how the whole process, certification process works. Okay, if there are no other questions, then thanks for joining the webinar. I hope you found this webinar useful, and yeah, have a nice day.
Cheers, Dejan. Really appreciate it. As always, fantastic presentation. Again, if there's any questions, please, Dejan's the man, incredibly talented in regards to its field. And another informal webinar, it was fantastic, Dejan. So really appreciate it, and thank you for your time, and look forward to the next.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Yeah, thanks everyone else.